Watch, my laptop ran out of battery. That's from Clinton. That's a Christmas present from Clinton. Okay. So I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to be looking at my notes because I didn't practice enough and didn't sleep long enough. So my name is Martina Schallenberg. I've been at Myriad for a couple years, 2.5 actually now. I am the director of software engineering under Dave Pedicola, and I lead the BOE team, the BOE Business Operations Efficiency team. This is why I was dressed as David Bowie yesterday, for those who thought I was a pirate. So what we do is we streamline and centralize and automate business logic here at Myriad. And I've been here for 2 years, and just following up with on what Stephen was talking about and loving this company. I really, really love this company. And I've been through 5 password changes here, and I'm still here. So it's true love right there. But I've caught myself even tearing up when I talk about how awesome Myriad is when I'm promoting it to the others. And I literally recruited and tried to recruit all my friends and my family. Like, can I get a raise of hands of all the people that came here from working with me? Like, there's Wendy, like all these people. So Myriad is amazing, and the work-life balance truly is something to be desired for. And I'm also really grateful for them giving me this opportunity to be up here and talk to you. I think my voice is getting a little shaky. So for those of you who have been on meetings with me, know that I love talking about myself. So here I am. I'm going to talk about myself today. So it all started in San Francisco with my bell-bottom jeans and flowers in my hair on the corner of Haight and Ashbury. We dropped some acid and, oh wait, that's wrong story. That's not it. But it did start in San Francisco. I got the opportunity to join some people, Rosie right there, at Women Impact Tech conference. And I've never been to a women-focused conference. I've never heard women speakers talk about women things, and it was really inspiring, but not just inspiring in a way to show you a path forward in your career and relate to success stories, but I got really motivated, and it was eye-opening for me because I really wanted to do that. I thought I had stories to share. It was really hard for me. I know this is going to come as a surprise to some of you to stay quiet in those talks and not voice all my opinions. So I jumped at this opportunity to talk to you guys. So I wanted to share specifically my life experiences and how they have helped me push through hard times and through bouts of imposter syndrome. And I feel like my voice is shaking, so it's making me really very self-conscious right now. So I always want to be a speaker. There's me. So growing up, I frequently changed grades, schools, countries, cultures, and languages. Change as a kid was my constant. And this perpetual flux and lack of belonging have shaped my character and taught me some very valuable lessons. However, I didn't know that treasure trove of tools I developed until much later when I had the opportunity to actually mentor and manage people. And I could impart that knowledge on other people. I'm like, oh, wow, this was really helpful. Like, it sucked back then, but this is really great now. So I realized 3 things in these leadership roles. 1, I'm not here by sheer luck, completely unqualified. Even though periodically I do have to remind myself of that. I am not alone in feelings of ineptitude. And I realized that I have an innate strength to take the next step forward, right? Which childhood years spent moving and learning on the fly forced me to acknowledge. So I tried to boil down these advice steps that I'm going to give you in 3 cute catchphrases. So map the next step, focus on what you want, and when in doubt, phone a friend. And that one was the hardest for me. So this is my early childhood. I was born in Poland in the so adorable. I was born in the early 80s in Poland at the peak of the Solidarity movement. It was an anti-authoritarian movement which ended communism in Poland. I was born the year before Lech Wałęsa got elected president. Got actually the Nobel Peace Prize for his leadership movement. And my mother was heavily involved in the protests and demonstrations, still while pregnant with me. She got gassed. She was out there, trying to make the change. And despite the gas, or maybe because of it, I was actually born exceptionally smart. Now, some poor choices in high school have like level set that intelligence for me. But the anti-authoritarianism stayed strong. So because of my brain and my mom's fearless and continuous drive for a better life, my life really began in this path of constant flux. And so it started with me being immediately moved up a year as a student. So I started first grade when I was only 5. And even back then, I would sense the resentment from other kids, like, you're too young, you don't really belong. The communist beliefs there where everybody was equal wasn't really working in my favor, and the teachers fawning over me didn't really help either. But the solidarity movement wasn't moving fast enough for my mother to make life better. So I lost my spot. It was just too long, and my mom she was getting tired of 4 a.m. lines in the grocery store to get a decent piece of meat for the week. She was angry because it was impossible to get toothpaste or underwear or any other basic materials at that point. And she hated the feeling of being trapped. Travel outside of a communist country back then was nearly impossible. So there were stories and rumors she heard that once you got into Denmark, you could apply for refugee status and you could stay. And with her magic and resourcefulness, she somehow got us booked on a vacation cruise across the Baltic Sea to Denmark, right? So we got the opportunity to get off the ship in Copenhagen. And we only packed for 1 week vacation because that's all it was. And we didn't want to seem suspicious. And I, of course, thought we're going on a 1 week vacation. But while all the other passengers went back on the ship, we stayed. So we stayed in Denmark, the Little Mermaid. And I didn't know that staying was part of the trip because, they didn't tell me that. I was 6 or 7 at the time. And I was still planning on going back to 2nd grade with all these friends that are finally starting to accept me. And I left my favorite giraffe at home. So we first stayed in an acquaintance apartment for a while. And once we overstayed our welcome, we moved into refugee housing. And that was one of the refugee housings that I lived that I really have fond memories of. They had a childcare program where nobody spoke the same language. There was all the shades of skin color there, all the different cultures, not the kids, not the teachers. And somehow we managed to communicate and get along. And that was my happy place in a refugee camp, which is weird. But my parents thought life would be better in West Germany. So just a few months later, we snuck over the border. So my parents bleached their hair to look more Danish. And we took a bus to the border building. And I'm 6 years old at the time, and we're trying to sneak behind the building. And I'm like, Dad, no, we're supposed to go through the doors, right? Border Patrol stopped us, redirected us. But the border back then between West Germany and Denmark was kind of like Canada used to be here. You kind of just waved your passport at the little front desk. So we went with a group. And as everybody was checking their passports, they just overlooked us and we got into West Germany. So we went in there, and it didn't really hit me. It was a really strange vacation at that point, right? Because it doesn't look like we're coming home. I'm missing my giraffe, but it didn't really hit me what was happening until they put me on a school bus and sent me to a German school one day. And I didn't stay there long either, right? So we went to Germany, and we because refugee life isn't really stable, the state can move you around as housing needs changes and how availability becomes, how housing gets available. So we moved a lot of refugee places in Germany until they finally settled us in Bavaria at the opposite end of the country in a house with just one other family. And they're one other family with 2 boys. They had 2 bedrooms on the bottom. We had the 2 bedrooms at the top. And I went back to school. But because of my age, they sent me back to 1st grade. And then because of my brain, shortly thereafter, they bumped me back up to second grade. So it was constantly like, there's small changes, but it's constantly like everything is growing, is changing. And then the wall fell. Like I finally went into second grade and I actually got to go to third grade and I started making friends and speaking German. And then the wall fell. And Lech Wałęsa became the president. He was the first democratically elected president of Poland in like since the 20s at that point. So refugee status no longer held water. And they're like, all right, your country's getting democratic, just go back. But it was okay because we were going back to our country, to our family, like to our friends, what we just left 2 years ago. And as a little kid, like finding your place in the world, it's just part of the process. So it wasn't really strange when I was changing schools and environments. It didn't feel very awkward. And it did it in addition because those changes were put upon me, like it wasn't my choice. I didn't internalize them. So I learned to accept these changes because it wasn't really my fault and nobody expected me to know anything and I didn't know anything. So it made it, you know, how could I know German, right? So it made it okay. So it gave me this different perspective of how to accept all these changes coming at you. And that's kind of similar as when you're starting a new job and a new position, and whether in the same or a different company, because the change concept is basically the same, except as an adult, you make the choices. You're not being placed there against them, against your will. But in tech, that usually means there's a new language, there's a new tech stack, there's a new set of acronyms. God knows we have a lot of acronyms here at Myriad. And within tech, culture change is a constant. Like if you switch teams, each small team has its own culture, and that's usually a big switch. The thing is, nobody actually expects you to hit this ground running when you change teams or get promoted, except for you. And I don't know why, maybe because we make the choice, but as adults, we always think that we'll get this new job and they'll just expect us to do everything. And when we get older, these stakes are different because it becomes, the need to belong becomes greater. And while our ability to accept this change decreases, right, as we become less malleable. So we start questioning whether we deserve to be here and compounding our insecurities and then letting this imposter syndrome pop up. And we need to take it one step at a time. And this isn't a new lesson, but has profoundly affect on that when you're struck with imposter syndrome, focusing on taking this one step at a time. And how you got here at this position doesn't really matter in the long run. You're here already. And all you really have is that next step to take. And that's kind of how I went through my childhood. And that's how I approach when I get struck with this fear and insecurity that like all I have, like it doesn't matter how I got here. All I have is to focus on this next step, and just being able to redirect that allows me to actually make that next step. And it doesn't have to be a step forward. It can be sideways or backwards. You can make that decision, making it easier to just deal with the fear you might be feeling. And imposter syndrome makes you question if you deserve to be here, makes you feel like you cheated your way in unqualified and you tricked all these people along the way. But how you got here to this moment doesn't really matter because all you have is what you do next. So the next step is so really important. And even if you swindled yourself into this position, pulled one over your boss, I mean, kudos for you. Like that's pretty clever. You just fooled your boss and probably a good portion of the company. And if you're capable of doing that, you can probably Google your job description and figure out what to do. But more likely you got this position because somebody felt you deserve it. You deserve the opportunity. You deserve this chance to grow. And because just by being here, you deserve to take the next step. Assuming, of course, you didn't leave a trail of dead in your wake. And that's a different syndrome and a different talk. So I went back to Poland. I went back to Poland, to my home country with my friends and my family that I left just short 2 years ago. But by the time I got back, I was already speaking Polish with a German accent. I was saying my numbers backwards, the German way. And all these kids that I've left behind, like had 2 years of bonding, of roaming the streets together, of playing soccer in the abandoned fields, of building forts. 2 years in a kid's life is a really long time. And I came back with Western clothes, with brand new toys. So I started 4th grade with the nickname Hitler. And I could have cried and refused to go to school. I could have hidden at home with my parents, my new little sister, and kept my head down. But what I really wanted, and I think what a lot of kids really want, is just to be part of the neighborhood and have friends. And I really wanted to have friends. So I just kept going out there with my fancy bike, following these kids around until slowly the name calling subsided and the knocks on my door kept coming as they kept showing up to ask me to go to play. And it's easy to present it today as tough little Martino and out there against all odds and owned it. But there were really ups and downs, and there's lots of tears and discouragements and hurt feelings. But what it came down to as a 10-year-old, what mattered to me the most were friends. And because I could focus on that, I could go out there and keep enduring it and break down these barriers and, make these breakthroughs in my neighborhood. And as soon as I did that, my brain started messing things up again, because for 5th grade, they formed a special math and physics focused class, and I got picked. And none of the kids from my neighborhood got picked. And even though it was a small change, right? Same school, same grade level, just a different class, those snide remarks just pop back up. And, the cold shoulders surfaced again, just because it was a little different. So I'm just going to tell you a story, and I bet you know who I'm talking about, or the person knows. Imagine you're a talented QA engineer with a solid Python experience. You set up integration environments, you review PRs, you do firefighting rotations with your software engineers. You write quality code, because unit tests and test code is still code. And then when there's a push to get a feature out the door, you even take on tickets and submit PRs, and you do a great job. And then you get promoted to a software engineer, because obviously you're going to get promoted to a software engineer. And it's basically doing the same job with the same people that you've been doing. You just get more money and a different title. And it's a seemingly small change. And in this scenario, however, it's not your coworkers or your friends picking at you, it's your own brain. It's your own brain telling you that you don't deserve it, that what are you doing in this situation? You're just a QA engineer, like you're clearly going to fail. And imposter syndrome is kicking in. So before you start beating yourself down for not deserving this and not being qualified, ask yourself why. Not why you think you're not qualified, but why are you here? What did you want to accomplish by getting here, by being here? And is this end goal worth it, right? Sometimes the stress levels aren't worth the end goal, and we have to evaluate. But once you define your whys and what you want, it's easier to accept where you are and then focus on the next step. And will this put all your reservation to rest and magically illuminate your path forward? Not likely, because you're just addressing the moment, and imposter syndrome is not an acute condition, but a chronic disease with flare-ups that keep surprising you at most inconvenient moments. But getting your whys and your goals and your potential escape routes lined up, it's like your imposter syndrome's acyclovir. That was a herpes joke. Thank you. For the next few years, I didn't know how that was going to go over. It took Clinton a while to get it. Bringing all it back. So for the next few years of my life, these little changes kept assaulting me. By 6th grade, as things were beginning to settle in my school, my mother threw me a curveball as she was making grand plans to move us to the States. And by 7th grade, my dad was already in Chicago. And while my friends were making plans, which high school attend and what major to focus on in high school. It's a little different, or was in Poland. You didn't major in college. You started your majors in high school. I already knew I was leaving, so it no longer mattered to me, right? I no longer belonged to that group, just knowing the fact that I wasn't there. So I finished 7th grade in Poland in October '95, because why would my parents get me there in time of the beginning of the school year? I started 7th grade again because of my age in Warren, Michigan, just outside of Detroit. So it's another new country and another new language. And this time there was all the cultures. Detroit is very diverse. And a few months into my attendance, they bumped me up again to 8th grade. But this was Detroit. And I wasn't the odd duck out, right? I wasn't, at least not the only duck, because there were so many immigrants there too. I had friends from Lebanon and Somalia, and we all had immigrant parents who spoke with accents, and we all lived in tiny, cheap, crummy apartments. And we kind of bonded and were brought together by being different, you know, and there was a lot of us. And it felt like the daycare at refugee camp, like I found my place, I found my home. And I applied for, you know, math-focused programs in high school. I tried out for cheerleading. It felt very American. So I had friends in my apartment complex. We were riding the bus together. You know, we were new together. We wanted to be American together. And I loved having all these shades and all these cultures in my circle. I wanted to be part of something, and being part of being different worked for me just fine. But I also knew at the same time that I had a way out. We had friends from Poland whose kids didn't thrive in a new America, and they got to be sent back and finish their school with their friends, stay with extended family. And knowing that you have an escape route really helps you to move forward as well. Just knowing that you can leave, just knowing that if you become a manager and you talk with your boss and establish that you could roll back to an IC if you wanted to, makes it that much easier to make that change. So planning your escape routes is also really, really important. But of course, as I was embracing being this immigrant and really liking Detroit, my dad's TOEFL scores weren't high enough to keep his PT license in Michigan, so we couldn't stay. And I found my home in Detroit, and we were moving to New Hampshire. And this move was the hardest for me. I hated everything about New Hampshire. The school I was going to attend in Michigan had almost as many kids in it as the town I was moving into, and diversity is not a thing in New Hampshire. So I started high school, and at that point, I just did my best not to make any connections, and I tried to really not care about anything. But when I was asked to the dance that very first year, I couldn't help but be excited, because you still deep down inside want to really belong. And he was going to pick me up, and I was going to get dressed up, and it was going to be totally American, like Brenda in 90210. Somehow, like 90210 made it past the Iron Curtain. I didn't watch many American TV shows, but that one made it through. So when he didn't show up while I was waiting, all dressed up, it really hurt. Even though I was determined not to care, rejection hurts. But then what was I upset about? Was I upset about the guy not showing up? I didn't care about the guy. I just wanted to go to the dance. I wanted to see people, be seen, be out there. And I didn't care about him, and I just wanted to get out of the house. So I went stag my freshman year to a dance. It was one of the most nerve-wracking, to this day in my life, moments of my life. Sitting in the passenger car as my dad drove me to this dance, to this new high school where I barely knew anybody. I remember the muscles in my back clenching up so hard, I could hardly breathe. I got tunnel vision. I contemplated just like throwing myself out of the car. Because what was I doing, right? I was new, I was foreign, not wanted. And then we get there, I get to the gym, and my worst nightmare came true. I entered the gym, the music stops, the lights come on, everybody points and laughs because I got stood up and showed up anyway, alone and weird and imposter. No, I'm totally kidding. Nobody cared. Like, nobody noticed. I got curious looks because I was like new and from a big city. The guy who didn't pick me up was there and said hi like nothing was wrong. And if he didn't care, if nobody cared, like, why should I? I was there for me. I wasn't there for him. I was there for myself to have fun. And it was so empowering and liberating, making that realization. And then that it just kind of paved the way for my high school and probably the attitude that some of you know me for. I also back then had this backup that if I got scary and unwelcoming, I just reminded myself that we'll probably be moving away soon anyway, so it didn't really matter. And that's how I approached life in high school afterwards. I embraced the weird and the different. And even though I didn't have my group of immigrants to fall back on, I kept testing the waters to just do what I wanted and I needed, not trying to match expectations or play into pre-existing social construct. Like I was really weird in high school. And in high school, I was still assuming, because I was still assuming we're going to move away any moment, it really mattered that much less. And sometimes I got burned, but I kept pushing these boundaries, and I noticed that really there wasn't this fallout that we all fear. I wasn't shamed or ostracized. People would raise their eyebrows at times, but most had their own lives to deal with and no spare attention for me, this oddball, right? They had their own thing. So we never ended up moving. My parents still live in New Hampshire to this day, and still nobody cared about Martina being weird then or now. I didn't fit the mold, and I didn't have to. And at the end of high school, I didn't get best smile as my superlative. I didn't get most likely to succeed. Definitely not most popular. They made a special category for me. I got most unique. I worked hard on that one. So imposter syndrome, like we know, it's feeling like a fraud and that your incompetence will soon be uncovered. You end up doubting your own abilities and even denying your own achievements. And because of what you actually perceive others think of you. Not matching the culture or not knowing the language, not being able to jump in with a hot fix to save the day really lays the groundwork as you enter new positions and your teams for imposter syndrome to kick in. But it is really us projecting on an opinion of ourselves onto others that is the culprit here. We assume people spend way more time than they actually do judging and evaluating us. Even our bosses, who are tasked with monitoring our productivity, are more forgiving and accepting to ourselves than we are, because they have their own imposter syndrome to deal with. So evaluating your own wants and needs, your reasons for being in the position you are, and the path you're taking, and how it lines up with your goals, really takes that power away from others that you yourself give to them. And focusing on what you want detaches you from those other people and what they may think, or what you imagine they may think. And other people really don't care as much as you think they do. So my life in flux taught me many things. Self-reliance, making the top of the list. For a good portion of my life, all I had was me. My parents were too busy keeping food on the table and searching for a better life. And with such frequent moves, deep connections and friendships were impossible. And I became transfixed with self-reliance. And at that point, not being able to do something by myself felt like a failure. And self-reliance is an amazing trait. I'm not, talking down on it. Knowing that you don't need anyone is extremely liberating. But knowing that you don't need anyone is quite different from refusing to ask for help or admitting that you need support and encouragement. So from my tumultuous youth, I spearheaded into adulthood, college, grad school, and then working as a strong, independent woman. It really suited me well. And I took my earlier lessons to heart, and I focused on me and what I wanted. And when my college advisor suggested I take an internship, so I majored in genetics, internship at a biotech company before entering grad school, I thought I already got in. I don't have to prove anything to them anymore. So I graduated a semester early. I spent the winter snowboarding, breaking 100 days on the slopes. For those of you who ski, that's a lot. And then when the snow melted, I packed up, I left for Miami and spent the rest of my time before grad school living on a scuba boat, living in the Bahamas. And I drank rum, I danced barefoot on the streets of Bimini. I encountered pirates. And then by the time I got to grad school, everybody cared more about my adventures at sea than a summertime of pipetting. And I skipped getting my master's. I went straight into a PhD program. I was the only one in my class who got to meet patients and actually work on their blood samples. We were studying early stop codon mutations and causing Smith-Lund-Leopitz. But when I realized grad school wasn't for me, like 2 years in, I packed up without a second thought and moved to LA, in with a man that I knew for like less than 4 months. We're married now. It worked out. And I did a little bit of everything in LA. I waited tables, I fought to protect the environment. with Environment California, where I got to meet Governor Schwarzenegger. That picture up there is actually from the SF gate, and that there's an arm, like that's my arm. They cut me off. I canvassed to support gay marriage for HRC, and I worked at a patent law firm filing trademark and patent applications. I even took the LSATs at one point, trying to become a lawyer and a politician. Like, I could do anything. I felt unstoppable. I did a little bit of everything. I didn't think there was anything I couldn't do. But it wasn't until I came to Salt Lake and I started tinkering with Biomex to make more efficiently prepare our PCR plates that I actually dipped my toes into software engineering, and I embarked on my journey that would lead me to the career I am at today. And I moved out of the lab and into engineering to support the lab's LIMS system. Then I moved to the parent company that provided the LIMS source code. And it wasn't until that startup, and this is like 2013, when after I already had my son, that through all those nights at the startup of all night coding sessions, of emergency bug fixes and last minute deliverables, that I finally experienced this connection with other people that you form with working with people and spending people for an extended period of time, not because you picked your people, not like your husband or your spouse or, you know, your best friend because you picked because you like them. It's the circumstance that puts you together. There's a commonality of space and time that I've never experienced before. That's our UniConnect team. There's Clinton. There's like 2 people in here from that photo. So on November 11th, 2016, we got acquired, and we went from a startup to an established software company. And with high hopes and big dreams for this creation of ours, a configurable, lightweight LIMS for genetic labs, we embarked on a new journey. And then piece by piece, week by week, we watched as our pride and joy that got desecrated and abused, and not just the product, but the people we brought with us and the teams we started building. It wasn't long until we went from the joys of creating and collaborating and innovating to trench warfare. The blood, sweat, and tears we poured into our product were blood, sweat, and tears that we were draining out of ourselves just to survive the day, the week, constantly telling ourselves, and let me know if you've been there, just one more month and things will stabilize and it'll be all worth it. But as the month turned into a quarter and the quarter turned into the year, my reliance on my inner strength began to falter. And with all my resolve, I couldn't do it. And on November 21st, 2019, I sent this selfie to Clinton Maddox, who's over there. This is our director of VMR right now. Not only did I admit to myself that I couldn't do it, I actually allowed somebody else in the secret. I do think this was like the first time that I was honest with myself that I couldn't do it by myself. 2 months later, January 2020, I started Myriad. 2 months after that, Clinton joined. I probably would have come to that conclusion myself, but having that friend that I could talk to that knew me from a working perspective helped me push through, make those decisions faster. So let's hide my ugly face. Here we are, Myriad. There's Clinton. Oh, yes, and there's other people. So in my leadership roles, I have guided my peers and my reports through challenging times and imposter syndrome with strength and perseverance. I was there to watch them take their first steps into management and pull them through when they moved out of the lab and into code. I was there to nudge them to make their next steps and to reassure them that I would be there and the world wouldn't end if they stumbled. My desire was always to elevate people, to make them self-reliant, to impart on them the self-reliance that I was so intimately familiar with. But what I completely missed was that what I was giving to all these people was what I was denying myself, which was the support and the connection, right? I was their support and their connection, but I wouldn't let myself do that. And it is that realization about connections and support that was my most recent and biggest lesson. So we can focus on our next step and we can focus on what we want, but sometimes we just need somebody in our corner, and maybe it's even many somebodies. So when companies talk to you about networking, it's not just to meet new people and to progress in your career, but also to have that support network for people to know what you're doing, what your struggles are, and to spread it across teams so we can work better together. And this realization, like, it wasn't a light switch, right? I'm not all like open up and talk about my feelings to everybody, but it was the beginning of the work I'm doing to like break down all these walls I have built with my self-reliance intertwined with my stubbornness. It's a work in progress, and my family friend still calls me out with like annoying comments of like, we all know you can do it, Martina, but it's okay not to, and it's okay to ask for help. He's of course right, but learning takes time and persistence. So as we grow in our career and as we advance to more challenging position and achieve bigger goals, our reliance on others tends to grow proportionally. We tend to be responsible for more people, and more people start to look up to us for answers and guidance. And it can quickly become overwhelming and lead to imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome makes you doubt yourself and the choices you've made. And people from all walks of life experience it, right? The most ambitious, the most of all. But I lost my spot. And marginalized groups like women, especially Black women, people of color, non-binary people, have the odds stacked against them, right? There's prejudices and microaggressions that tend to reinforce their self-doubt. But in the end, that self-doubt is still a feeling that we on our own have to deal with. So yes, we have to do work, continue our work on local, global, and corporate levels to enforce equal treatment and equal resources for equal opportunities. But I also want to make sure that we all have tools, and as many tools as we can, to once we're in that low point, in that self-doubt, imposter syndrome, we know what step to take next. So you will question your abilities here at work, as a partner, as a parent, as a driver backing up a trailer. And sometimes it will creep in, and sometimes it hits you like a sucker punch. And fear and insecurity will always be part of our existence. But the more tools we have to battle these insecurities, the more we can learn from what scares us, and the more we can grow. So I was here to present to you the tools that I use and hope they're helpful, and to talk about myself. Thank you. Such a beautiful face. Questions, comments? Nothing. Awesome. Long-awaited break.
We have someone virtually saying, I love your story.
Thank you.
I see you in our light.
Thank you. Yeah, make friends. Friends are good. Thanks, Clinton.
Thank you, Martina. That was really inspirational, so I appreciate it and learned so much about you. We are going to take one more break. We have another session. I know people are probably getting tired. I appreciate you all sticking through it, but go ahead, take a 10-minute break.